welcome to Graceful Healing, a podcast to get straight talk about healing and living again. My name is Maureen Lake. I'm a holistic health coach, speaker, author, and thyroid disease fighter. Each week, I'll be bringing you graceful conversations to inspire you to seek new ways to hit the reset button to catapult your health and vitality to new levels. Listen in and open your heart to all the new possibilities. Are you ready? Let's do this. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Graceful Living Podcast. This is Maureen Lake, and I'm back with Kole Whitty. I'm telling you what, you better buckle your seatbelts for this guest interview. Kole's story and experience spans, really over 17 years, but it starts with her waking up from a coma after a drug overdose. I don't want to spill the beans on her story because it's amazing, not only interesting, but where she started from to where she is today is really, truly a miracle. Now, Kole and her husband have this amazing company. They're biointegration specialists. And just to listen to her talk about the techniques that they use with their clients on relieving stress, tension, and trauma is unbelievably remarkable. So basically, without any further ado, I can't wait for you to meet her, listen to her, and be as thrilled about her and her journey as I am. So here's to Kole, a true walking inspiration. Good morning, everybody. Today I have the most amazing woman on the show. Thanks for being here, Kole. I can't wait for everybody to hear your inspirational story.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I love to just share, and in any way, if it can help someone else from my path or what I've been through, then it's my honor to do so.
Oh, good. Because I know you have an incredible philosophy and a way of changing mindset for people that, truthfully, I don't think a lot of people are aware of. So can you just share a little bit about your personal story and your journey and how you ended up to where you are today? And then I can't wait for you to dig into what it is that you teach other people.
Sure. I mean, to give people a little bit of a preface, your history gets stored inside your body. Your body's like a personal diary, and it's the only part of you that's ever in the present moment. So our life experiences, our trauma, it doesn't even have to be trauma, but stressors, everything, emotions, shame, guilt, everything gets trapped in your body. So what I learned was that my body was trying to communicate to me. Now, the short version of my story, because we could do, a whole separate piece just on like each part of the story. I had some trauma as a young child that, led into my teens, which meant anger, rage, some sexual abuse as a child that led me down into that path of an at-risk youth, kicked out of different high schools, got into substance abuse, and ultimately ended up in a coma at 17 from a drug overdose. And at that point, I had dropped out of high school. I was selling drugs. I was, just doing what I needed to survive. And it obviously didn't end particularly well for me. And I knew that I was dancing in not the most, not the safest environments. Mm-hmm. However, like anything else, that's what crafts and curates our path, our journey. So by the time I was 17 years old, I had already overdosed and ended up in a coma. I'd been dropped off at the hospital as a Jane Doe because, they couldn't stay and tell the police or the hospital who I was or what I had ingested, which was GHB. Most people know that is the date rape drug. I took it willingly because back then we would take GHB to come down off of stimulants like ecstasy, cocaine, things like that, because it gets you to your REM sleep faster. However, it's extremely dangerous. It was first used by bodybuilders because it could get them into that deep sleep and they could recover faster. However, it's extremely dangerous. So, and again, there's a lot more to the story, but from there, I decided I was going to have to do something with my life to ensure I didn't stay on that path, which meant, new friends, new environment, new everything. I decided to try out for Miss Utah Teen. I won. The platform was substance abuse education. And I was like, well, if anyone's going to educate the youth of Utah, I think that would be me. Right. So we're talking 17 years ago now.
Wow.
And that led me into speaking on all of the major television shows, the talk shows, and going on the news and sharing my story. However, I was sharing my story from a place of shame, of guilt, and of sadness and hopelessness. And that's what I was attracting in my life. And I was getting 200 emails on average per day. And this is after they were filtered for any weird ones. And people begging for help, for hope. What should I do with my kid? For kids, what should I do? My parents an addict. And it was so overwhelming because by 21 years old, I was making incredible money, having a career as a speaker. But I was so devastated by sadness around me all the time. And, that really led me to a lot of internalizing and hopelessness. And I moved to New York City at 19 years old, got signed to a major management deal. And I thought, all my worries will be over and the rest will work out. And needless to say, it worked out the way it worked out, not the way I thought. So at 23, I left New York City, went back to Utah, married a man my parents really liked. And that lasted about 5 years till I realized you can't make other people happy. That includes marrying someone for someone else. So that left me in a position of multiple medical conditions, not very overweight. I mean, it was about 40 pounds overweight, but it was how my body was holding it. Very toxic. I had hypothyroidism, endometriosis, ovarian torsions, a 40-degree curvature in my spine of scoliosis, fibromyalgia, arthritis in my knees. I was having migraines, and I had had 26 broken bones throughout my life. So a lot of, and just all freak, and I say freak with air quotes because understanding what I do now, that's another thing, but just a lot of dysfunction, a lot of toxicity, a lot of inflammation.
And you were 23 when?
Correct. Wow. When this all started. And it got worse by 27. I had gone to Disneyland, or maybe it was 26. I'd gone to Disneyland with my ex-in-laws. And after 3 hours of walking around Disneyland, I just sat down on the ground and started to cry because I couldn't walk anymore. My knees were too swollen. The pain was too much. And here I am in this marriage that I assumed at that point I would have kids someday. And I was like, I couldn't carry a pregnancy right now if you wanted me to. The not just the physical weight, but my energy and just my overall sense of well-being. So I was like, I've got to do something. And I didn't know what to do. So I thought, okay, I'm going to buy a treadmill and I'm going to walk on it every day, even if it's just 5 minutes. So depending on how bad my knees were or the fibromyalgia, even if it was just a few minutes at a time, it was something. And when I tell you, Maureen, when I moved the treadmill into the house, it dropped on my foot, split my big toe in half. And I couldn't even lower my foot for 2 weeks. I had 2 years of reconstructive surgeries and I was like, it was those moments when you're just looking up at heaven or, the universe, whatever, like, what did I do? What did I already had enough shame and guilt for the life I had led. And it just felt like I was hated for who I was. And that was the message to me. You have to change how you're living, not how you're moving. Your experience of what you're eating, because I was drinking wine every single day. I was taking sleeping pills to sleep, caffeine to wake up, that kind of standard story. My thyroid was shot. And this was basically my message that movement is not what you need. You have to change what you're putting in your body and the environment you're putting your body in. And that's when the transformation started. And the first step was understanding that not all, but most of my fibromyalgia was from inflammation, from food. So that was kind of the beginning stages. And, I lost weight and started living my life for me. Ended up leaving that marriage and that relationship, moved to Austin, Texas, and started pursuing my dreams for myself. And I knew someday I would go back to speaking. Someday I would go back to sharing my story. And if it can inspire people, great. but I didn't want to do it from that shame, guilt, or this retribution for everything I thought I had ever done wrong. And that's kind of where we are now, is revisiting that deep desire to contribute and to give back, knowing I have done that for myself.
That's amazing. I'm just sitting here trying to comprehend as a young teenager what you went through. And then a few years later, you win a pageant, going to New York City, and you probably never even had the time to process any of it. I mean, everything
at that point, I didn't have much space for it. Because I was burying myself in serving. That's one of the best ways, and I say best, sarcastically, to avoid your experience of those things.
Exactly. I know. Keep yourself busy. You don't have to think about anything, and you just keep on powering through stuff. In the meantime, it all builds up. And I know with my own experience too, stress after stress after stress, then lo and behold, slammed with illness. So I'm so interested to know how you came about to learn about what you teach now, what you share with other people, because I just recently read a book by Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you've heard of his work, and I just find it so fascinating, rewiring the brain. I can really relate to that with my background in special education. And I never really thought about it in just everyday personal life. And it makes so much sense to me. So I can't wait for you to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, ultimately, a lot of our physical experience is based off of something that happened in the past that we're still holding on to. We didn't process it physiologically. For example, I work a lot with resetting the nervous system. Our nervous system is like the most ancient, old world, whatever you want to call it, part of our body's organism, or just as humans. Before we had thought, we had a nervous system. Before we had that brain power. And what happens is our nervous system has fight, flight, or freeze. It's designed to keep us alive. The thing is, it does not know the difference between us being chased by a woolly mammoth or a car coming at us or someone yelling at you. Physiologically, the response in your nervous system is the same. What happens is first, you actually go into a freeze first to assess what's going on, even if it's just for an instant. Then it's fight or flight. Can I get away? Can I run? Or am I going to have to fight? So your blood gets sent to your legs, your appendages, to fight or to run, which means your digestion shuts down, your cognitive function shuts down, your sexual function, anything that isn't necessary for survival gets shut down so that you can act with immediacy. So it's an incredible, incredible gift that we have. However, in our society now, we don't give our nervous system the space to downregulate, or we've been in a heightened state for so long, our body doesn't know how to regulate. So it stays in that heightened state of fight or flight, or what's also known as the sympathetic nervous system, until it gets shut down, until we push ourselves to the point of crash. That's our body's way of getting us back into the rest, digest part of the nervous system. So I got into this just through exploring more on my self-work, my journey, realizing that, holy cow, the other part of my fibromyalgia was my deep resentment for myself. I didn't want to push my anger outward, so I directed it inward. And I noticed that with stress and when I was hard on myself, it would intensify, or certain pains in my back. And I started to go, there's something to this, because I started to track it in something that I just called my U journal, YOU, and started to just collect data. And look, this took me 9 years. This wasn't a 1-year process. This was 9 years of really saying, okay, I didn't say when I started this, I'm going to find a way to be pain-free. I said, I've got to get this from a 9 to a 7, from a 7 to a 5. And as I continued to get in less pain, then it wasn't until a year and a half ago, I said, my new mantra is I am pain-free. So what all my decisions are based on, does that align me to what I desire or not? Not is something good or bad, but is it aligning me to this experience I want to have of my body. And then that's what led me more into studying about not just quantum physics, but epigenetics and the way that our genes express. Mm-hmm. That led me into studying more about how our subconscious thoughts become physical manifestations. You know how they say thoughts are things, mm-hmm. or psychosomatic really just breaks down to brain and body. Right. So even if someone says, oh, it's all in your head, yeah, could be. And until we address those psychological components, those thought patterns, it's not going to go away by diet alone. Mm-hmm. So for anyone listening that has done all the diet changes and there's still these things doctors can't explain, it is built or can be, if it's not environmental, say mold or something like that, it can be some of those subconscious beliefs, experiences that happened at a very young age that helped to determine the lens to which we see the world through.
Mm-hmm. I can't agree with you more than I do, because one of the things that I always look at with the clients that I work with is what's the real root cause of what's going on. And a lot of people will say, well, it's because I'm eating so much sugar, and that may be a symptom of it. But in order to really heal, you have to go deeper. You have to really become a detective. And I just think what you're doing is so cool. And I have to share with the listeners a saying that you have on your webpage that I just think is great. It's biohacking is cool. Biointegration is key. Mm. That's perfect.
Yeah. Well, there's so much power in being able to scientifically, physiologically hack into our systems. It's like proper use of medications. It can help us for a period of time. However, what's the dysfunction? Why isn't the body absorbing things? Why isn't the body able to produce certain hormones? Like you said, what's below that? So biohacking is an incredible tool. I use it. I love it. It's amazing. And it is still limited because all the supplementation in the world cannot override those subconscious thoughts, beliefs, and what's going on underneath it. So understanding your own conditioning, understanding that your thoughts are limited by your perception, which comes from the constructs you were raised in. Mm-hmm. Most of our beliefs were pretty much in stone by the age of 8 years old, as far as who we believe ourselves to be. So we react the way that we were taught, mm-hmm. So even depression can be patterning from a parent. So if someone comes to me and they're like, I'm depressed, but I don't feel like it's mine. I don't know where this is coming from. We do look at it in a whole perspective, right? We're going to look at everything. What's their hormone production? What's going on in their life? And I can't tell you how many times it's their patterning was from a parent that was highly depressed. So they actually learned the behaviors of a depressed person, mm-hmm. not that they are.
Mm-hmm. So how do you go about helping people change? I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know, I'm just kind of assuming that you work maybe through some meditative techniques and obviously nutrition. Totally. But what are some other key areas that you do?
So it's a bit dependent on the person. I work with my husband very closely. That's why it's Kole is our business. And he was in emergency medicine for 25 years in New York City hospitals. So we have the Western medicine perspective as well. And we're not here to say medicine isn't needed, necessary, or other. Mm-hmm. We want as much information and data for an individual person as possible. So part of what we'll do is we do require them to wear a biostrap for heart rate variability, their movement practices. We track their sleep cycles through technology. We talk about their stressors, their life situations, medications, movement practices, and then we kind of come up with a plan, right? It could be a TRE or somatic trauma release exercise type things where we need to work with their nervous system. But ultimately, it comes down to creating new habits because we are, as a creature, habitual. Mm-hmm. So we can sit and talk about the traumas, but if we don't take action, if we don't support the body physiologically to have good building blocks for brain health, for neuroplasticity, to create new neural pathways, sometimes that's through meditation. Sometimes that's through, we have online courses and classes and videos to teach them these concepts so that the rational mind has an understanding of the why it wants to do affirmations facing a mirror. It's not just some woo-woo stuff. Mm-hmm. When you stand in front of the mirror and you say, I am pain-free, I'm giving my body the message to affirm that reality through action in the present moment, because I'm seeing it with my eyes. I'm witnessing this truth. I'm hearing it through my ears, and I'm feeling the vibration in my body. We affirm stuff all day long, right? Trip, oh, I'm so clumsy. I'm so stupid. Why do I always do that? So we want to create new neural pathways, because when neurons fire together, they wire together, which means we've got to get as many to fire as possible. We have physical movement practices we call biointegration techniques to do cross-plane work with your physical body to help create new neural pathways with sensation. Because if we help you feel more empowered, your brain starts to wire what empowerment feels like, and will start to crave more foods that give it energy and strength feeling, because that's what it will seek out.
It's amazing. I love it.
We love it.
Yeah. How long have you been working with your husband?
Really, since we met. When we met, he actually got me into fitness. He was a nurse and a personal trainer for 15 years because he wanted to help keep people out of the hospital. So personal training was his first step, so he had one foot in the hospital, one in the gym kind of a thing because of his own journey, and as I met him, he said, wow, I'd really love to work with you because I couldn't bend my knees far. Even though I'd lost weight, I could do yoga. I couldn't run. I couldn't do anything high impact. And I was told you have bad knees. So here's all the things you can't do with bad knees. And I took that on. When I met him, he said, you don't have bad knees. Your knees need love, attention, and intention, intentional movement. So I was like, sign me up. I'm like, let's do this. After 3-4 months, I had full range of motion of my knees, no knee pain. And he said, you should become a personal trainer and a fitness instructor. At this point, I was taking his insanity classes, which is high intensity interval training. Oh, wow. For anyone that's watched late night TV with Shaun T, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So I became a certified insanity instructor. And 2 years after that, won instructor of the year for all of Beachbody, which was 20 some odd thousand instructors.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. Yeah. And it was really, for me, the fact that I could jump, the fact that I had this power that I never even conceived as possible, meant anything was possible with my body. So that was when we started working together and doing online fitness challenges, and they built up to 500 people. And we had 2 different clients lose over 200 pounds and, dozens lose over 50. However, 6 months later, 7 months later, they're putting the weight back on. So it was, okay, we've got to focus, at least for us. Personal training is still very important and we love it. However, we want to focus on digging deeper into the why. We understood the why, but that wasn't our business, as far as what we were offering people. So we started focusing on how do we help people with the underlying issue, the real problem of why they're turning to food, of why they're, trying to fill this void, or why they're overly obsessively working out, because that is as destructive to the body as overeating. That's why a marathon runner can suddenly have a heart attack. There is abuse in fitness too.
Right.
So that was the beginning of it, really.
That's incredible. It really is. Boy, whatever you put your mind to, you do it. I do. I know. It's just like, it's fun to hear your story. It's pretty amazing.
There's so many. And that's also the gift, because of the trauma that happened to me as a child and how I interpreted it, was my opportunity to learn how to protect myself, save myself, figure it out. And I didn't graduate. I didn't graduate from high school. I went back and got a GED. I didn't go to college. So when I entered into the world, it was, how can I get this like maximum impact experience without having the credentials, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I show people? Well, I study, I learn, and then I prove it. I put my money where my mouth is. So it's like, if I showed up to a job, I couldn't apply unless I could get to a person because I didn't have the degree. But I knew more than most people that worked in the industry because they were at school, but I was studying the cutting edge, stuff at the front of science, which doesn't end up in school for years. So it turned into a huge gift that I never went to college because it put this fire under me to learn in whatever ways I could, which meant I was at the forefront of, like now my closest friends are at the forefront of neuroplasticity and brain health. And then I'm getting the first information,
Right.
I'm educating. A lot of our clients are doctors and physicians because they don't have time to stay at the forefront of everything. And a lot of what they're doing, especially if they've been a doctor for 20 years, is antiquated information.
Exactly.
We're not basing this off of stuff we're making up. This is the medical studies. This is the most recent studies in the, study of neuroplasticity or epigenetics or brain health or whatever, fitness, so that we know what's going on and we can address whatever our clients come with, because most of them are proactive in learning and it's overwhelming too. What do you sort? And the truth is you have to individually work with each person. A keto diet does not work for everyone. A vegan diet does not work for everyone. What's going on with the body and what are the messages we're getting from the body? My husband is completely vegan. He didn't choose veganism. He loves that animals aren't hurt because of his choices, but that's not why he does it. He does it because he has, and we don't even say has anymore, but for the sake of story, I'll say has, an eye condition that's degenerative called retinitis pigmentosa. They told him he would be blind by the time he's 40. He just turned 47. So we started to learn about stem cell growth and health. And when you're stressed, one of the first things to go is your eyesight, right? When your body is in fight or flight, sight is not necessary for survival. So we started focusing on getting the stress thresholds down for him and getting him in a life that is not stressful. And being a nurse was stressful.
Yeah.
So, he left the hospital 3 years ago, and this has been the focus of our work. And for him, his sight has started to expand because of his diet and his life changes. That doesn't mean going vegan is going to cure everybody's eyesight. It means when you'll track and collect as much data as possible, then we have a place to go from to help reverse engineer where you want to be and really access your truths using your body.
I've heard that before. I know with myself, I personally wanted to go vegan, and I got my degree at Cornell. And so I know everything about plant-based education and knew exactly what to do and what not to do. But it wasn't until I had some blood work done and I was feeling some other fatigue on top of my original fatigue that I came to understand that it wasn't good for me. As much as I wanted to be vegan, it really wasn't good for like my blood chemistry and my chemical makeup of my body. I just needed animal protein. And I just found that when I got that information, so powerful to know that like my husband can be vegan and reverse his type 2 diabetes because of it. I wanted to too, but it actually was making me more fatigued because I have Hashimoto's, and for some reason it just wasn't ideal for my own physical body. And I was so disappointed, but I'm like, well, wait a minute. I can still, eat clean and do everything that I need to do and stay healthy. So
totally. Well, and it doesn't come as a surprise when you understand how women's hormones are produced, right? So when it comes down to hormone production, if we don't have enough fats, if we don't have enough protein, if we don't have enough carbohydrates, it impacts the way that our body produces our hormones. So for me, I eat mostly plant-based. Now, I have bone broth that I get from a local source here in Austin, Texas, that I know where it comes from. I know the treatment of the animals, and I still don't eat meat. It'll be once in a great while. However, I've found other supplementation for me that works, other vitamin deficiencies that I had, and then I have bone broth, and that made a huge difference for me. But that's why we don't even really attach to the labels of vegan or vegetarian or whatever. I say I eat plant-based. The majority of what I consume is plant-based. I'll have from time to time too free range organic eggs where I know the source from. I know the animals and how they're treated, because I did notice a difference. Just like a random story, makes me sound like a total like hippie, but it's fine. That I had eaten a gyro, one of those, shawarma sandwiches.
Right.
And I used to eat them semi-regularly, especially I used to teach 14 to 17 fitness classes a week. Okay. I burned a ton of calories. I could pretty much eat as much as I wanted. And after I finished this shawarma, I sat back and I just closed my eyes to cuddle with my husband. And I got this image of a lamb screaming like it wouldn't die. And I was just like, it ruined it. That was it. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like this whole thing. And first of all, I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening, but it was that final kick for me into eating plant-based. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this and see what happens, but without attachment to this moral dilemma, because when we shame and guilt people, we create more dysfunction and we create these constructs that manipulate people to perform a certain way, which is not empowered. So for us, regardless of what someone chooses, it's also important for us that there is not shame or guilt. It's one thing to explain to someone the ramifications of what they choose or the consequence, but consequence as result, not consequence as a negative connotation. So, people react as they've learned and their experience, and most people use shame and guilt to manipulate. So it's something we're conscious of, even in diet. If someone's like, oh, I ate really bad, we're like, well, what does that mean? Oh, I had sugar. It's like, well, look, by removing whether something's bad or not, you can help get yourself out of this perpetual cycle of shaming yourself, which usually shoots you right into that downward spiral of eating more, until you're sick or until then you really feel terrible. And physiologically, you feel terrible because of the amount of sugar and what happens to your brain as a result. So, even just by telling people, look, we're going to find what works for you. And the ultimate goal is for you to be aware of how shame is one of the biggest contributor to what's going on, because your thought is limited by your perception. And if your perception of you is that there's something innately wrong with you, then no matter what you do, whether it's what you eat, the type of diet you choose, the lifestyle you choose, you can't win. And no, you can eat vegan and totally clean and all of that. If you still are shaming yourself for or believe there's something innately wrong with you at the core of who you are, your stress hormones and your entire nervous system will still light up and cause your reproductive organs to shut down and your hormones to go out of whack. And, so for us, the number one thing isn't even diet. That's part of it, but it's what is causing the dysfunction for you to continue eating or what you're craving or whatever.
It makes so much sense. So Kole, where can the listeners find you? What's the best way to contact you if they wanted to learn more?
Sure. The best is tahkole.com. It's TAHKOLE.com. There's also a whole video section where we break down about constructs and what happens when you're under the strain of multiple constructs. We call it construct strain. And you can get in touch. We love events and retreats. We do once a month, typically in Austin, Texas. We do it at our home, and we only take 12 people at a time for our workshops because we want to be able to sit and integrate with each person what's going on with them specifically, because that's what ultimately most people are missing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we lead a trip to Peru once a year, which the next trip is this coming March. It's March 9th to the 24th, 2 full weeks. In that, we do get involved with shamanic practices, Andean plant medicines, tribal traditions to, again, access more experiences to shift how the brain processes. Mm-hmm. And what better way to do it than in an incredible location and looking at Machu Picchu. And it's awesome.
Oh, I bet it is. And you said you do that once a year?
Once a year, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's coming up soon. Gosh, I bet that's just incredible.
It is. We were actually married at Machu Picchu. We love it so much.
Oh,
like
cool.
We love Peru. So.
Oh, that's so neat. I always end each podcast asking each person that's been a guest, and thank you for being my guest, one question. And so I'm going to ask you that question. And it's really kind of a basic question, but some people find it easy to answer and some don't. But I'm going to throw it at you right now. What's one sentence of advice if you could tell your younger self, if you could go back in time? What would you tell little Kole?
Well, man, there's so many things. Honestly, if I was going to go back and tell me, all I would say is everything will be amazing. Mm-hmm. Everything will work out. Just keep going. And that's it. Because even having that little light of hope for me is what kept me alive. That's what kept me from not committing suicide as a teen. That's what kept me from surviving my coma. So it would just be to keep going, don't give up. And no matter what, not to settle in my health, because my health was directly related to my mental health, my physical health.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. This has really been inspiring.
My pleasure.
The work that you're doing is so needed and important.
We love it. And that's why I love to share it any chance I get, because if I can save someone, it took me 9 years to come to this. If I can help someone do it in 1, which most of the time we can, then it's my honor to do so.
Yeah. It's incredible. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me today. This episode is brought to you by my book, The Graceful Advocate, Taking Control of Your Life After a Diagnosis of Thyroid Disease. You can find it currently on Amazon. I love it because my friends call it a purse book. They keep it with them when they go to the pharmacy, grocery store, or even to the doctor's office. It's a great little guide to keep you on track and informed. I can't wait for next week when I get to see you back on the pod. Thank you for listening. I really do appreciate you so much. If you ever need someone to chat with about your healing journey, don't ever hesitate to reach out to me through my website at maureenlake.com.